All right, thank you for listening to another episode of Remake Rewind, the podcast where we decide if remakes or reboots should have happened. I'm Mike, as always. With me, I got my buddy Alex. How are you doing, bud?
Hey, I'm good.
And do you want to introduce our guests?
Yeah, this week joining us is my friend and fellow filmmaker, BJ Colangelo. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I believe I'm a fellow Paisan. I'd be embarrassed if I got it wrong.
I always tell everyone that it's a syllable short of being a Ninja Turtle or a Renaissance painter. Your choice.
yeah,
Fuck, that's good.
That's a good way. I'm happy I purposely let Alex introduce you because, one, he's your friend, and two, I didn't want to be the one who tried to attempt that name, but I would have said it correctly. So I feel like I shot myself in the foot and didn't give myself
you just got
myself an opportunity.
You got to build up your confidence little by little, and then one of these days you can take on a really complicated name.
Right.
BJ's a filmmaker and a writer at Shudder and Autostraddle, and also has a podcast with her wife Harmony.
I sure do.
Excellent.
Doing all the things.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast and your film making career, and then we'll get into the topic. But let's get our listeners to know who you are a little bit.
Sure. So I've been writing professionally in sort of the horror sphere for the most part for the last 10 years or so, because I'm finally an adult, which is great. So I write a lot about horror for, if you've ever gone to a website that has ever discussed a horror movie, I've probably written for them at least once.
Nice.
But as was mentioned, I also write for places like Autostraddle, sort of dissecting gender and queerness in film and pop culture, because I'm a lady and I'm a queer lady, and it makes my brain tingly and happy to dissect a lot of these things. But I'm also a filmmaker. I like to make weird films for $0 because I just have a compulsion to do so. And that's kind of where I'm at with things. And yes, I
Excellent.
do the podcast with my wife. I like to consider myself a champion of dismissed cinema, which is also why I chose these
That is a great
titles.
I like that.
The films that people kind of turn their noses up at, I like to find the merit in. So our podcast is This Ends at Prom, where we analyze media meant or marketed towards teen girls, because I'm an apologist for them and my wife is transgender. So she missed all of these films that are so important to my upbringing. So we analyze them as, does this actually have staying power, or is this something that we only think is good because we have nostalgia glasses for them? Like, I've had enough conversations like, is The Goonies actually good, for a lifetime? So why not do it with films geared towards the other end of the gender spectrum?
I like that.
That's great.
Could I ask you a question? Because this is one of my favorite movies is, and this has nothing to do with the topic that we're covering today, but one of my favorite movies of all time is Point Break. And we found a way to shoehorn covering it a second time on this podcast by saying that Fast and the Furious was a remake of Point Break. But while we were discussing it, Alex brought up that it actually could be a queer film.
Oh, totally.
And that he thinks that wow, I totally forgot the director's name. And it's one of my favorite movies. So how did that just happen?
Don't tell him.
I'm not going to.
Oh, no.
I'm going to watch Flounder.
Dead air.
God damn it. I'm going to get it in a second, but the harder I try to think about it, the more I'm going to...
I just want you to interrupt
Flounder
mid-sentence when it finally comes to you.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
We're going to be talking about Brendan Fraser, and I'll remember.
Yeah. So do you agree with Alex's... not depiction, but analysis of that movie? Because it never dawned on me that it could be like a queer film, and it's Keanu and Swayze were actually into each other. But as soon as he pointed it out, I was just like, I started reevaluating a movie that I watched 3 or 4 times a year in a completely different light, and it doesn't ruin the movie at all. It enhances the movie. And I was just, you mentioned that you write about queer. Topics in cinema. So has that ever come up, or have you ever seen that before?
Oh, totally. A lot of movies that deal with very loving bromances, Point Break, Top Gun, these types of movies really get the queer read because the way I look at it is the same way historians will write about like famous authors. And it's like, and she was a spinster who never married but lived with her friend for 40 years. It's like, just say that they're gay. Like, it's okay for them to be gay.
Right.
I mean, and I think we're a lot quicker to give those reads to, you know, films like Scream and Billy and Stu. They get sort of that queer read, but for whatever reason, we're so hesitant to give those reads to action films. I think it's because there's this weird, like, but they're macho and they're masculine, and we have a very
same thing with the Fast and the Furious movies.
Yes, like there's this very fixed idea of, you know, what queerness is. But yeah, you can definitely give Point Break that sort of a read, but I think that that's a magical film because either you give it the queer read and then it's like, oh, fun, now we have another queer movie to add to the canon, or you keep it so that they're straight and now it's like a healthy form of masculinity that we should all aspire to achieve.
Right.
Yeah. We talked about how Fast and Furious is sort of a spiritual remake or ripoff, depending on your point of view, of Point Break. And yeah, the magic of Point Break really shines through when you watch a few of the Fast and Furious movies that like get the sort of they get the queer read, but in like a joking way.
Oh yeah, I mean, the whole Fast and Furious franchise is like, you know, we're not friends, we're family, and queer people have been existing with chosen families since the dawn of time. So it's like, if anything, you're kind of co-opting something we came up with, friends.
Yeah, and it feels like I feel like you're never sure if Fast and Furious is aware of what they're doing. Like, I'm sure that name redacted, the director of Point Break, knew exactly what she was doing or had a pretty good idea. I know what it is.
I was going to pretend like I didn't figure it out and interrupt later. The first thing that came to my mind was James Cameron's ex-wife, but I didn't want that to be the identifier. And then like it clicked because I was going back through the Academy Awards when she beat him.
Wait, say it. You haven't said the name yet.
Like, it's Catherine Bigelow.
Yes, congratulations. And a lot of her movies can be read queer, which I think is really interesting. So,
well, without further ado, let's get into the topic. We let you pick the movie. So what are we going to be talking about, BJ?
We are talking about 1967's and the year 2000's Bedazzled.
I was really happy when you picked these out because I had not too long ago went back and rewatched The Mummy, and then I've also been rewatching Scrubs lately, and I just finished the 8th and final season. I know there's a 9th season, but I'm not going to watch it again. And Brendan Fraser is a reoccurring character on Scrubs for the first couple of seasons.
I didn't know that.
When you decided that, I was like, oh, I really want to watch this movie. And because I miss the early 2000s, late 90s Brendan Fraser, and it was really cool going back and watching this. And I had never seen the original, and I'm not a big Dudley Moore fan. But, you know, watching this, I was really excited to go back. And I'm just going to say up top, I enjoyed both of these films. So I'm really excited to talk about these ones with you guys.
Yeah, likewise.
All right. Well,
I can't say anything different.
We need to figure out how we're going to. So had you seen either of these before, BJ, or have you seen them both?
Oh, yeah. I've seen both of these. Admittedly, the one from the 2000s more frequently and more recently,
of course,
because this movie falls in a sweet spot that I like to call like my homesick movies, where they're ones that whenever I just really need some garbage creature comforts, this one ends up in the rotation because it's one of the, like, my mom still has not figured out my taste in films. Like, she knows that I like absurd comedy in terms of like John Waters and a lot of camp, but she also knew that I was like really big into House on Haunted Hill 1999, which had Chris Kattan in it, because I was 9 when that came out.
Hell yeah.
But it has Chris Kattan in it, and then Chris Kattan is also in Monkey Bone, and she also knows that I
another
love...
Brendan Fraser movie.
Exactly, another Brendan Fraser movie, and Encino Man is also one of my sick day movies.
I love that movie.
Love it.
I haven't watched it
so
in like
much.
A decade. I'm waiting until my wife wants to watch it on our other podcast, Ruin My Childhood, which is essentially, you know, watching Goonies and saying if it's actually great. Like you pointed out, it's just a generic nostalgia podcast. But I've been really wanting to watch Encino Man, so I've been holding off. And my wife also has interacted, I don't want to say knows, but interacts with Sean Astin fairly regularly last year over some Zoom meetings. So I'm really hoping that we could somehow finagle getting him on. So I'm really holding off on Encino Man. But
I'm such an apologist for Encino Man. And I guess like that weird concoction of movie has made my mom be like, well, this has a hot lady devil and Brendan Fraser. Of course my 10-year-old will enjoy this. And she was right. I enjoy the shit out of it. And I'm also one of those people that, much like The House on Haunted Hill, if I find out that it's a remake, I do go back and track down the source material. So I was watching that movie, and then as like, I don't know, maybe like a 14-year-old later in life, I was like, I should probably find what this is based on. And I think the thing that surprised me the most is how much the remake pays homage to the original in like really small ways that are very clever.
I agree.
So I find this to be a really nice back-to-back because I think there's a lot of respect in the remake.
Yeah, we usually save the question of the podcast is, should this have been remade? And we usually save that for the end, but I feel like we can kind of just answer it up front, right? Feels organic.
I thought it like I can't say it better than BJ did. Like it does its own thing. It's whenever we soapbox at the end, so there's sometimes where I try to justify the existence of the movie, but I always say the perfect remake does its own thing but pays homage to it. And I think you hit it on the head. Like this, it has a few of the same jokes. There are a few lines that are almost line for line the same, but even when they do the line for line the same, the situation is different. Like it's very well crafted. I mean, Harold Ramis wrote and directed the sequel, so I didn't realize that. So as soon as I saw his name pop up on the credits while I was watching this on Vudu, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a lot better than I think it's gonna be. And
this is a movie that would not have been as good without Harold Ramis.
I agree. I absolutely agree. So can you, BJ, since you picked the movies, can you pretend that you're pitching the movie to an executive and kind of summarize the first movie and what you think it should be or what it is, but like just pretend I'm an executive and you got to get this movie made.
All right. So I know that all of us at some point had to read Faust. And I don't know about you, I've always found it to be a little stuffy, a little dry. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that we take two of the current 1960s, because that's the time we're in, satirists of British comedy, and we retell Faust in a zany, comedic way. We're gonna have this sad sack who's just hopeless, and he's gonna sell his soul to the devil for 7 wishes, but it is the devil, so you know there's gonna be some tricks up there. Magician's cape, we're gonna put him in a magician's cape. Let's just address that right now. That's the design we're going to go for. And what's going to happen? Will they learn about themselves? Will they make the perfect wish? Who knows?
Will there be a scene where one of the characters tries to commit suicide?
In like one of the funniest possible ways, and that's... I'm allowed to make these jokes because I've tried to kill myself multiple times. But when like that scene goes on for so long, and you're like, it's like, why are there so many jokes like this rapid fire? And also, why am I not offended? What have you done?
It's the zaniest suicide I've ever seen on screen.
Just so you guys know that when this got made, they'd already shot it, but the studio was like worried about that scene in particular. So Tom Cook, who plays the devil, or George Spigot is what he goes by in this movie. For those of you who are a little, I don't want to say younger because this movie's still like 35 years old, but he was the priest in The Princess Bride, Marriage. That guy. He wrote and wrote this with Dudley Moore. They were doing a TV show at the time. This was their first movie, and some of the scenes are ripped directly from sketches from their TV show at the time. But he shopped this around and had it go to like a cardinal to see if a cardinal would think it's offensive, kind of like in that scene in Hail Caesar, where they go to all the religious leaders to find out if like their Jesus allegory movie is going to be offensive. But apparently it was an archdeacon didn't consider it blasphemous, so they let it go. But then they re-rated this movie in 2012 and actually bumped up the rating to the equivalent of a PG-13 from PG because of the suicide scene. So in the 60s, it was deemed not offensive, but in 2005, they changed the standards and said it was a gratuitous suicide depiction, and so they actually made it a harsher rating.
I think Jaws was also PG when it came out, and it would be like an R now. So
you're right, because they didn't have PG-13 back then.
Well, I know in the UK especially, they have much stricter rules, especially on self-harm and portrayals of suicide, to where movies that are, for all intents and purposes, like very like soft, if there's any sort of indication of like depression and self-harm, they've been known to jack movies up to like an X rating.
Yep. So yeah, this one, he was able to convince the archdeacon that this wasn't a glamorous depiction of suicide. Is at the time, that was what set it aside, was if it made it like it was a good thing. So but yeah, they got it. The case was dropped. They were able to release the movie as is, and it went. But God, what are some highlights of this movie for you guys? Because God, there's so many from just a dialogue standpoint. This movie is quick, witty, sharp.
Well, I got two right off the bat. BJ nailed one with the cape. That's top 5 of this movie for me. Like I want one. And there's this scene where he's like, "Oh, can you hang that for me somewhere?" Just like paying extra attention to highlighting that it's a cape.
That it's And
then as far as dialogue, he says sloth instead of sloth.
Yeah, so she says it that way in the new one too. I think that's
so. I don't know if
that's
a British thing or
I think that is like they say aluminium instead of aluminum.
Well, that's spelled
that's
differently.
The proper word.
It's spelled differently too, though. It's a different word.
Anyway,
those are my top.
But I mean, BJ, you pointed out how they like had a bunch of suicide jokes like back to back to back in that short 3-4 minute scene. But there you go. Hey, you realize this is a criminal offense, and unless enlightened time, they'd have you hung for it. And then like they're struggling to turn off the water on the broken pipe like the whole time. And then there was like a Mussolini joke because Mussolini was hung and then shot. Like it's just a bunch of back to back jokes, and yeah, it is a little. I think if this movie was made today and they had that same scene, I don't know if that same scene could be in a movie today.
No, I don't think so. And I think that it only works because, I think in part because of who is delivering it and how it's being delivered, because I think it diffuses the situation when it's coming from these two actors who at the time, I think so many people associated immediately with comedy and satire that they're not going to be like, oh, this is a serious message that I'm taking from this.
I think if they're unknown actors or something, it would be a different case.
Yeah, for sure.
They were fairly unknown at the time. Neither of them had been in a movie. Well,
but they're on TV, right?
They were in their first season on TV, so they were still fairly newcomers. Like they were still filming their TV show like as they were filming this movie. And it was like season 1. They only did it with the first season of the show, or I guess they would call it a series, was in 1967, the same year as the movie. And they had both had like background and bit roles in movies, but this is both of their first leading role in a movie. So pretty big deal for this movie to get made by them at that time.
Well, especially too, because this one's being directed by Stanley Donen, who is like singing in the rain, like this huge, massive, like influential director is making this movie. So I think that's also going to elevate it to this new sort of caliber level that a lot of first time movies are not going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of going through the plot, like I'm just going to expand on it a little bit, kind of rapid fire, go through it, and then we can kind of dissect certain scenes. Any scenes that, pop out at you guys, let me know. But, the devil shows up, sees him having an unsuccessful hanging. He tries to hang himself off a pipe. The pipe breaks and water's rushing in. And he's like, ooh, is this awkward? kind of thing. Like really pointing out that that's kind of a sad thing. And he goes and tells this guy, Stanley, played by Dudley Moore, is the guy who tried to kill himself. And then the devil goes by George. But they talk about, he says he's there to talk about the, millions of dollars that his family had. It just goes and talks about how he had all these very successful family members. And then his grandfather who blew all the money. And he goes, well, what does that leave me? Penniless and suicidal. And he's just like, the devil makes all these jokes, but he does a really great job at kind of like knocking Stanley down this entire time to kind of sweeten him up to get him to essentially sell his soul.
He's like,
but he explains that he's the devil, and he's going to give him 7 wishes, and he goes, 7 days of the week, 7 deadly sins, 7 brides for 7 grooms, which is another little silly joke that I like when he's talking about this serious matter. And it starts with giving him a trial wish, which is to get him a raspberry ice lolly, so essentially like a popsicle. And he has him go and buy himself the popsicle, which is just a funny way. Then he ends up taking him to this what was the business? Was it I don't remember what the business was. That was like the front for the devil soul stealing business. But what do you guys remember what it was?
Yeah, no, it was like a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
I recall.
Yeah.
It's just
there was like
little
mailboxes and stuff. I don't remember what it was. Like
general retail.
Yeah. But then he had one of the sins. So that, like the 7 deadly sins, a couple of them pop up in this movie, but anger was there. He was kind of like the bouncer letting the guy in. But he had a shirt that said "Make war, not love."
Yeah, I want that.
Was hilarious. But yeah, so essentially he signs this document, and he gets instructions that anytime he wants to make a wish, he just blows a raspberry. Greg will show up and grant the wish. So, and with the magical word, Julie Andrews, which I found hilarious. And then there's a point where later on, I think it's the second or third wish, he tries to change the magic words to Jackie Kennedy, and it doesn't work. And he's like, "Oh man, Julie Andrews," and it works again. It's such a stupid joke, and I found it hilarious. I don't know why I found that particular joke so funny, but I could not get over it every time he said Julie Andrews.
At one point, he says LBJ, and that's how they end up in like the shithole part of the city, which I thought was very funny.
Well, in that same part, he's like, "You're not wearing nylon underwear, are you? Because it disintegrates at rapid speeds." I think it's just like, what?
Because he quicksilvers them.
Yeah.
He rushes him across town.
Yeah, it's so funny because there's like almost no special effects. It's just a lot of that stuff. Like they just jump into frame after they're supposed to be teleporting and stuff like that.
Yeah, this movie is a very low budget.
It's got a lot of like Doctor Who like style of timey-wimey nonsense, which is fun.
Yeah.
So the first wish is the one where he just wishes to be more articulate, right?
Yes.
And a millionaire?
Yeah. I have this in my notes, and I don't remember why I put it, but I wrote that the first wish is very horny.
Oh, it's because he wishes for Margaret. So the whole thing is like he wants Margaret to fall in love with him, which is his coworker. So she's like the hostess at the restaurant he works at, and he's the short order cook.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants her. So the first wish, they're spying on the love interest through a telescope. And he says he wishes to be a multimillionaire and for Margaret to be very physical. That's
it was articulate because they're at the zoo talking about how like they're animals and
that's
humans
right.
are
And
animals,
then
and they should be able to kiss
rape.
someone if they want to.
Yeah, that was weird.
And
that scene went on.
That's the one wish that doesn't sit right with me because I understand the joke is like, oh, he's so articulate now that he's now pretentious, and she's kind of like yes-anding everything that he does. But the way that the wish ends is very
it
not
was
okay.
very abrupt.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that, and like I feel like she would have I don't want to. Like he wasn't trying to rape her. He thought she understood what was going on, but she just screams it over and over again. And then he blows the raspberry. That did take me aback. I didn't really understand what was happening or why, because she seemed into it.
Yeah,
and that sounds really bad to say.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like she's laughing with him and then she's not laughing with him. And I think the abruptness is supposed to be the comedy, and also like I don't like putting moral lenses on things from the past because that's just not the world we were living in. But with, newer eyes, you look at it and you're like, ooh, that joke doesn't land the way that
and it's
it
also
would have.
A different culture. Like this movie didn't do well in the US when it came over. So maybe there's a different cultural thing about the acceptance of that type of joke in that time frame.
Well, they doubled down on it too. That's the first of 2 rape jokes in this movie. Yeah.
So that was a little weird. The second wish was when was the horny one too, because he specifically says, "I want to be a multimillionaire. Well, I want Margaret to be very physical." That's when he says Jackie Kennedy, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, he's like a simp in that one. He's like OnlyFansing her. because he's just buying her all sorts of gifts and shit.
Yeah, this is a very like the high class British cuckery of not being able, like, it's beyond the realm of acceptance that this would be possible. Like, there's no way she could be doing this, and that's exactly what's happening.
So the second wish goes awry because she is very physical, but she's physical with, like his friend or, who's supposed to be his friend in this world. So like in this world, it seems like you always have George Spigot who's around and, may or may not be another character. But then there are other people who are in his life. So he's at this mansion and he's got a bunch of like yes men around him. But like one of the yes men is like very, very physical with Margaret. And there's a point where he walks into the room and you see a little side boob in the mirror, and he's just like, "Oh my god!" And then he blows the raspberry because he's like so upset that she's with another man, and immediately cancels out the wish. And it's super weird. I don't know. That was another weird scene for me too. That felt a little gratuitous, but it's also British. Like they're much more open to like that kind of thing. They're also like really like like everybody's just watching her in the pool, and like the devil's like, she's got a great body. It's very gratuitous. It was a little weird. And what's funny is I'm saying these things that are really weird, but overall, I really enjoyed the movie. Like I kind of wanted to rewatch it again last night.
I think you're instinctively feeling what BJ just said. It's like it's from another time.
Yeah,
like we're forgiving some things.
Yeah, we are. It just feels weird forgiving things in the 2020, well now 2021 woke culture. Like it feels weird to acknowledge that it's a different time.
I think it's less about forgiving and more about being able to hold two truths simultaneously. That's a much better way to say it. Yeah, this is a very entertaining and quite frankly ridiculous piece of comedy, and some elements have aged horrendously. Like both of those things are true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct. I think a lot of this stuff too is not like openly mean-spirited as well.
No, I don't think it's mean-spirited or malicious at all. Like it is just meant to be farce from beginning to end, and it's there's obviously a satire through line, like very early kind of being anti-consumerism, anti-capitalism in the 60s, which I thought was pretty interesting. And that really comes to a head at the end of the movie when like God comes into play, which in this version God is a upper crust English gentleman is what George Spigot describes him as, which I thought was pretty funny. The rest of the wishes kind of like jump around, like they don't tend to be as long. So like the next one, they end up going to the devil's house and Raquel Welch is randomly there for 3 minutes. Lust. And she plays Lust.
That helps sell the
apparently
movie, I promise.
She was in every poster, every ad, all the marketing. They used her for everything.
That's what I'm saying.
They thought it was funny. They did it as a joke.
I mean, it's a joke, but also that got people into the theater.
I'm sure it did. But at that point, he wishes to be a pop star, and he sings like one song, and it's like the Beatles on whatever show they were on in the 60s. That was a big deal when they came to America. But it was like, black and white. And then George Spigot goes on and he plays a set, and like all of a sudden he's not famous anymore, so he cancels the wish.
That one's kind of fucked up. Like the devil, I mean, the devil is the devil, and I shouldn't say that he's being unfair, but he really like interfered with that one.
Yeah, he's like super did. But he shows up in the other ones too, which is a little weird. So the next one, he just mistakenly says he wishes he was a fly on the wall, and then it's like animated for a little bit.
Yeah. I did want to say the band that George Spigot does is called Drimble, Wedge and the Vegetation, and it's fucking awesome.
I think that one also has a really good commentary on how fickle fandoms are, because the devil is not just interfering because like, oh, now I'm the new hotness, but it's also a complete shift in tone and genre and type of music, because it went from being like, oh my god, love me, to him just being like, I don't want any attention, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. That is grade A satire.
Yeah, it really is. Like it's pretty subtle at certain points, and then it's like really heavy handed there, and then at the very end of the movie when they're wrapping up the movie. The next wish is the first wish where he starts to try to be a little bit more careful, where he starts to realize, this is where he realizes the devil's kind of fucking with him and he needs to be smart about his wish. So he says like, I wish that Margaret and I are madly in love, and she's cooking anniversary dinner. And then the twist is they're both married to other people, and they're unable to consummate it because they feel so bad about it. So they're like making out in the car, and they both just start crying.
That's my favorite of all of the failed wishes, because
I think so too.
The juxtaposition of them like just manhandling each other while crying is so funny.
It's stupid. And then the next one was him. He wishes they were both mutually in love. They're both single and available, and there are no other men in her life. And then they both end up as nuns. And this one's interesting because he's supposed to be a woman in it, and she admits that she loves him or her. He's called his sister, but there's like this weird like trampoline montage.
Well, they're not Catholic nuns, right? They're like a made up religion.
I think so.
Because that was a church ritual that they were jumping on the trampolines.
And it was like a 5-minute
it was very long,
jumping around on
they're leaping in unison with them, and one of them does a flip.
This one is an extension of a sketch from their show.
Yeah.
Which I don't know what it is with just leaping nuns or just
it's pretty funny.
The trampoline thing in general, because my brain immediately was like, is this where the Man Show got idea for the trampolines? Like, why is this a thing? But I'm not upset about it.
Did this predate The Flying Nun with Sally Field?
Oh,
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I need to look that up.
That's a good thought there.
I'm wondering if that would be really funny if The Flying Nun came from this. Let's see.
There's a
Flying
poster.
Nun was 1967, the same year.
Oh, that's
and it came out in September. It's possible. It's downright plausible. I think we cracked this thing wide open. Flying Nun ripped off Bedazzled.
Scandal.
And then so that was the last wish, kind of. So that was like.
I wanted to point out in the church they're in, there's a poster that says "Big Sister's watching you."
That's so funny.
Yeah, I love that.
So he keeps blowing the raspberry. Like immediately when he realizes he's a nun, he blows the raspberry, and he keeps blowing the raspberry, and all the nuns are looking at him like he's crazy. And then he finally finds George, and he's like, "Dude, what the hell?" And he goes, "That was your 7th wish." And he counted the popsicle at the beginning of the movie, and he's kind of like, "That's not fair." And he's like, "Dude, I'm the fucking devil. Come on, man. Like it's in the contract." So the whole reason that the devil's doing this, besides being the devil, is that, and this number doesn't make sense, but it was supposed to be the first person to get to 10 billion souls. If he beat God by getting 10 billion souls, then he would get to become an angel again. And so this movie kind of ends with he goes up to Stanley. He's like, "You know what? Like I have a few extra souls. You're a cool dude. You've been friends with me. I'll give you your soul back." So he goes to God and is like, "Hey man, let me back up to heaven." God's like, "Nah, brah, you're done." And so then it ends with Stanley's a little bit more confident. He goes and asks out Margaret, and she agrees to go out with him at a later date. And the devil attempts to, lure him back in. And he's like, "No, I'm good. Like I've got a date with the girl I like. I don't need to sell my soul again." And that's kind of how it ends. But
the God laugh is very scary.
Yeah. And then he has this big monologue where he's like, "If that's what you want, well then I'm going to, build more freeways and build more roads and sell more advertising, and we're going to, go through consumerism." And he just kind of goes on like an anti-capitalism rant, which I thought was pretty interesting in the 60s. Like that's, pre even American consumerism at its peak.
Yeah.
And a lot of his gimmicky in between wish, I don't know what to call it. Just he's being a pest.
Like interludes?
Yeah, the interludes, like just his rambunctious behavior is also very rooted in anti-capitalism, where he's scratching all of the records or cutting off a single button on the shirt, ripping pages, the last page out of a book. So the things that he's doing, they're not.
He was also doing something underwater, sabotaging something. What was he sabotaging when they were all in the scuba gear?
I don't remember.
I don't either.
That's right.
I couldn't figure out. He had an arc welder kind of thing, and he was cutting some pipes or something underwater.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
I guess he was going to sink the ship, right?
Yeah, I wasn't.
I guess
super clear on that one, But I also I like that he's not being so destructive. He's just being extremely inconvenient.
Yeah.
Which
He's like early stages Project Mayhem.
yeah.
Yeah. There's this meme that goes around every couple of years and like various groups that I'm in, and it'll be like, you're a robber and you break in, but you only steal things that mildly inconvenience somebody. So, the example will be like, you steal one shoe kind of thing, or you take out one shoelace or stuff like that. And it's kind of like that level of mayhem that he does. It's just like things that are mildly inconvenient for people.
It's mischief.
Same thing. Like he trains a pigeon to poop on people, and he calls it the puda. But yeah, it's just a little silly nonsense. But like this movie, I'm not a big Dudley Moore fan. Like I've only seen like Arthur, and I didn't like that movie when I saw it 10 years ago. So I'm probably not being fair. But Cook like just was amazing in this movie. Like he was just all of his line delivery. I was just enamored by this movie the entire time because of the character George Spigot and how all of his lines were rapid fire and so charismatic. I loved him in that role.
I think that he's so commanding because even in the the nunnery, I guess, where he's not even doing that much talking, there's so much being said with just the way that he carries his facial expressions. He's definitely the shining star in this piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. So
we all watched it on the Daily Motion app, by the way, right?
Yeah.
And it was...
So unfortunately, this movie can't be found like anywhere. The only place I could find it, I found like one website where you could pay to rent it, but I'd never heard of it before, so I didn't want to risk putting like my credit card or anything on there.
Yeah.
But we did find it. Every time we can watch a movie legally, we always pay to rent the movies, or we stream them on places that are streaming them for free. But this is one of the rare examples where we could not find the movie, so we did watch it on Daily Motion, and it's not the best image quality, but I understood the movie.
Well, it was funny. I didn't mean to point out that we sort of watched it illegally, but I don't think we had a choice for this one. But it was like stretched and like 480p or something, and I got used to it. Like it wasn't the end of the world, and it's an engaging movie, so it was fine. But I just wanted to say I was looking around on YouTube afterwards, and I found a few like clips from the movie. And whatever the clips are from was like a great transfer. And I was like, fuck, this is actually a good looking movie. And we watched this like goofy stretched out thing.
We watched it in a way that like Christopher Nolan would be very disappointed in us.
I watched it on the toilet on my iPhone.
But it was a fun movie. Like I was very annoyed by like the quality initially, but like I completely was engaged in the movie once the dialogue just started snapping along.
Oh, I also thought the I don't mean to have sandwiched shitty takes. The opening credits, like the music that they played over it, was very like, oh, I'm gonna watch a thriller now. This is like a heist movie.
I hated them.
Yeah,
I got a headache watching it.
It's really incongruent.
Like, yeah, it was super weird. I don't understand what it had to do with any of the movie, but it's. I was happy to get out of the credits. I was very unhappy initially. I thought it was gonna be terrible with the opening credits because I got.
I was a little bummed out with the credits, but. Definitely pulled.
Yeah, it was just like a cacophony of noise and like just really bright flashing lights. Like if you're somebody who's prone to seizures, like maybe fast forward through it. It's like it was like the scene in Willy Wonka going through the tunnel. It was like that level of just like sensory overload.
Yeah.
But it's just the opening credits. Everything else is easy to watch in this movie. Yeah. So before we get to the next movie, guys, what have you guys been up to, buds?
BJ, why don't you go?
Oh goodness. I've been making my way through a lot of series that I've seen before. And then some that I haven't. So I'm finishing up Letterkenny because I waited far too long to get into Letterkenny.
I just restarted watching it yesterday.
I mean,
I still have not started.
I just want to like personally fist fight whoever was like, oh, it's a lot like Trailer Park Boys, because that's why I avoided it for so many years.
No, it's so good.
It's so good. It's so good.
All right, I'll watch it.
But I've been doing a lot of adult animation and one children's animation for something that I've been writing about over at whattowatch.com. So I did King of the Hill, I did Central Park, what else? Great North, close enough. And then the one that really kind of blew me away, which was not adult animation, I watched all of Craig of the Creek, which is meant for children. And
Never even heard of that.
Craig of the Creek is a children's cartoon on Cartoon Network that is the most inclusive cartoon I've ever seen. It's set in reality. Incredible voice cast, but it's very, I think like Hey Arnold is probably the closest I could compare it to, where you're dealing with children who have built kind of their own societies, but the humor is unbelievable. Like there's the Elders of the Creek, which are like 19-year-old kids who play Dungeons and Dragon and Magic, and it's so smart, like incredibly smart. It does not talk down to children. Terry Crews is the lead character's dad, and it's central to a Black family, and they're not afraid to like talk about how sometimes like shit can suck if you're a marginalized kid. But it's never like a very special episode. Like they don't do that. It's just part of it. Somebody recommended it to me because Georgia Hardstark and Karen Kilgariff of My Favorite Murder voice teenage lesbian goth girls that all of the kids in the creek are convinced are witches because
That's so funny.
because they had tarot cards, and like all of the like the teens or the adults, they live in kayfabe for these kids. Like they never like correct them and be like, you know that's not real, right? Like that shit doesn't exist. So these kids are just like, we built a time machine out of a cardboard box, and they're like, you sure did, kids, which is just great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, blew me away.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm looking at it online right now. The animation looks great. It looks like a lot of fun.
It's super fun, and
That sounds great.
It really embraces, I think, a lot of the creativity that many of us grew up with. Like there's a character who is very much inspired by like the magical girl animes, so she's very Sailor Moon in her appearance. There are like little subcultures of kids, like the ninja kids are all like super anime kids. There's the 10 speeds, as they call them, are kids that like are really into like BMX bikes. There's horse girls that are just girls that think that they're horses and like
it kind of sounds
around.
like Recess also.
Yeah, like there's a lot of these elements to it, and they definitely pay homage to a lot of these older cartoons, but then presented in a way that I think is really accessible to kids who have grown up always having the internet.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So those have been like my big things.
I'm just looking at the Wikipedia for it right now, and the composer is a guy named Jeff Rosenstock.
Yes, it is Jeff Rosenstock
He's
music.
Fucking awesome.
There's so many good giant ska numbers in it. It just makes me so happy.
Yeah, that is super cool. Jeff Rosenstock was a punk musician in Bomb the Music Industry, like yeah, New York punk collective.
Yeah, and, one of my wife's favorite.
I just have one of his. Yeah, I have one of his solo records, and it's fucking incredible. Cool.
All right, bud.
Thanks for turning us on to that. I'm gonna check that out.
You're welcome.
I'll go next. I watched. It's like not nearly as cool as BJ's. I watched the 2 Matthew Lillard Scooby-Doo movies.
Hell yeah!
I love those movies.
They are not good, but they're really fun.
I almost said Sean.
So they are
Gunn,
good because they're fun.
James Gunn wrote those movies.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I find those movies very fun. And
no one is a better Shaggy than Matthew Lillard. Like that was perfect.
Well, and that's why I
even though he's 30.
to watch. Yeah, I refused to watch that Scoob movie that came out last year.
But Will Forte does a voice for that. I'll watch anything that Will Forte does.
Yeah, but the issue where I take umbrage with the film is Matthew Lillard did the 2 movies, but he's been voicing Shaggy off and on for years now.
Right.
And he didn't even he found out via Twitter that it was going to Will Forte. They never even called him about
that.
The movie.
Does suck.
Which is such an insult.
He deserves at least a heads up.
Yeah.
Have you seen the video of him at the convention? It's like a horror convention, and there's this little girl who is clearly not okay being at this horror convention with her parents, And I think Matthew Lillard was there for Scream, and he's seeing this girl freak out, and he looks at the parents.
And 13 Ghosts.
Yeah, he looks at the parents, and he's like, she likes Scooby-Doo? And they're like, yeah. And then he just, drop of a hat, clicks on the Shaggy voice, and this girl is like, suddenly everything's perfect, and I love the world. This convention's great. And that is one of my go-tos, like, I need to cry in a good way, so I'm going to watch Matthew Lillard make a child's life.
He seems like such a good guy.
Yeah, on social media, he seems good. Like, one of my favorite tweets that I've seen in the last year or so was somebody tweeted, because of like a facial expression Trump made, they're like, Matthew Lillard should totally play Trump. And then he like quote tweeted it, and he goes, first off, how dare you? Secondly, I am available though. And I think that was fucking great.
He was in was it Big Little Lies when he was one of the husbands? He was in some dramatic cable TV show, and he was fantastic.
He was in the
Girls.
last season, or no, the second to last season of Halt and Catch Fire.
Yeah, that's neither one of those are the thing that I'm talking about, but I'm glad that he's in a bunch of dramatic
He's married
stuff.
to Christina Hendricks on Good Girls, and it is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've been wanting to watch that show. I've heard it's really good.
It's wild. It's fun.
It's in my Netflix queue. Okay. I like Mae Whitman. She normally puts in a good performance, so if she's in it, I figure it's probably halfway decent.
Yeah. I'm looking through the rest of my movies from the last week, and I didn't realize that I've been watching all stoner movies. So there's those two, Tenacious D and The Pick of Destiny.
I hate that movie.
It's
Love
so
Tenacious
much fun.
D. Hate that movie.
It's fun. I like it. It's, again, not a good movie, but a whole lot of fun, which makes it good. And then a couple nights ago, I watched Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
You watched that not that long ago.
I know. It's like, I guess it's a comfort movie for me. I listen to a lot of, I've been listening to a lot of Kevin Smith's Fat Man Beyond podcasts, because I'm just like inhaling WandaVision theories for the past month. And they talk about it for like an hour at a time.
Nice.
So I think I just kind of had Kevin Smith, in the back of my mind, and I needed something silly.
I started watching Clerks last week, and then like my internet crapped out like 5 minutes into the movie, and I didn't go back to it.
I've been wanting to watch Clerks 2, and even more so Dogma, which is not available anywhere.
Huh.
Yeah,
Clerks
it's
2
really
is fantastic.
frustrating.
I love that movie.
Which one?
Clerks 2.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I'm really bummed that Dogma is not available anywhere, because I think that's a really
That's
fun
surprising.
I think it's super funny.
Movie. Yeah.
A bunch of his movies are on HBO Max. I'm surprised Dogma isn't one of them.
I looked it up, and there's like a rights issue specific to Dogma. I think
weird.
the Weinsteins are involved.
Damn Weinsteins. God damn it, Harvey.
Yeah, that's like low on the list of offenses.
Oh, yeah, that's like the
Come on,
lowest thing on priority, but I could still be upset about it. He's in jail right now. Like, I could be mad about this.
Yeah. Fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what
other
I
ones?
didn't watch?
What didn't you watch?
Oh, actually, maybe we don't want to harp on this. You can cut this out if you want to, but I saw the Woody Allen documentary go up, and I was like, I don't need to see that. I get it, man.
Dude, look, I don't
Fuck
understand
that
why granted,
I'm glad that it
there are
exists.
some
like it
people
should be,
don't know.
Yeah.
There's some.
But I don't
feel
need
like
to
it's
watch
pretty.
it.
There's some wild.
I feel like
shit
it's pretty
in
common
That's
knowledge.
very upsetting to watch.
I don't.
I watched the
I don't
Michael
need
Jackson
to watch
one.
it. I know he's a monster.
Yeah, like he's a terrible human being, and I think that we've all established that. But like rewatching just a lot of children, like watching Dylan Farrow talk about things, or watching these like 16-year-olds talk about things. I'm like, I don't want this in my life.
Yeah.
No. Oh.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring the mood down.
All right. Well, I'll just shotgun some of the stuff that I watched really quick. So PlayStation Network had some games for free and massively on sale. So I got Control for free, and it's an unforgiving game. There's not a lot of tutorial, and it's fun for about an hour or two, but then it's very samey. So I stopped playing that. Wow, my cat figured out how to open the door. Good for her.
Clever girl.
The Resident Evil 3 remake, it was half off last week.
Oh,
so
cool.
I started playing that like the night before last, and I'm not like, I don't get freaked out by movies, but for some reason like scary video games actually really do. Like,
that's a thing. That's a real thing, because there's no safe distance because you're interacting with it on a one-to-one. I cannot play horror video games, nor can I go into haunted houses, because I overproduce adrenaline and I will either throw
Interesting.
up or throw a punch, and I can't be trusted in either situation. So I'll watch Let's Players on YouTube play horror games and then cry a little bit.
Interesting.
But yeah, I can't do it. And I've tried. I'll get like 3 steps and I'm like, nope, like controller down, can't do it.
No, there's a lot of like the Resident Evil 3 remake is way less scary than Resident Evil 2 because Resident Evil 2 remake that came out like last year or the year before is much slower paced and like you're being stalked by a giant monster the entire game.
Yeah, I'm not.
And so like at any point it can come up.
The sound of
But
those
Resident Evil
feet
3 is
haunt my life.
yeah, but Resident Evil 3 is more action heavy. And so it's just like jump scares. Like periodically a zombie will just like pop out of something and there's no way you can avoid it. And it's like, I hate that. But the game's fun. And then in terms of like what I've watched, I finished my Scrubs rewatch, not counting the 9th season when they try to reboot it because it's garbage. But I finished that. I restarted watching Letterkenny yesterday. I already watched the first season in the last day or so. We watched Bridgerton, the entire series Bridgerton, my wife and I, because she was on bed rest the last like week and a half or so.
Yeah,
so
who is the lead in Bridgerton?
they're all fairly unknown, at least in America. They're all like up and comers in England.
I kept on seeing pictures of the redhead, I guess the main lead.
Yeah, she's Daphne Bridgerton.
I kept on thinking it was Sophie Turner, and I was like, is that...
There are times where she really looks like Sophie Turner. What I think she looks, actually, my wife Katrina, she pointed it out, and I couldn't unsee it after she pointed it out. She looks exactly like the animated version of Wendy in the Disney Peter Pan. Like, it's uncanny. Once you start watching it, you're just like, there's so many points where she just looks like a cartoon character. I mean, it's not a good TV show. Like, visually, it is one of the most beautiful TV shows I've ever seen. Like, it's in 4K, it's in HDR and Dolby Vision and whatnot. Like, it's a beautiful show, but it's Gossip Girl set in like I think it's 1805. So it's like 1805 Gossip Girl. Like, that is the premise of the show. Like, there's a like a self-published newspaper, and it's like a gossip column, and people can just read into it. But yeah, it's just like Victorian Gossip Girl.
Cool.
And then my wife had never seen
That's
Face
such a
Off
good pitch.
before, and I convinced her to watch Face Off this week, and it was really fun to go back and watch that movie.
What a great choice.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much everything we watched. I think good enough to get through this segment and on to the next movie.
Yeah, let's do it.
Alex, pitch the movie, man.
Oh boy. Hold on, I have to gotta reset for this. I was thinking about Bridgerton. So you remember that movie from 1968 with Dudley Moore and Peter Cook?
67?
67. The answer is supposed to be no.
Get out of my elevator.
You're a movie exec in the 2000s. We're going to redo that with The Mummy, the literal hottest woman on the planet right now, and it's going to be directed by a Ghostbuster. So we're basically going to print cash. That's my
Fortunately,
pitch.
it didn't print cash, but you know, it doubled its budget by the time you've factored in like marketing. Like, I'm sure it made a profit, but not a huge one.
Well, I think that the pitch was that it's going to print cash.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's everything you said was accurate.
Yeah, no, this is like we kind of talked about in the beginning.
Fraser.
This is what's that?
This peak Brendan Fraser, peak Elizabeth.
I think so, right?
Hurley.
Yeah, I think
this is 2000. It's a year
It's
after
peak
the Mummy.
Hurley.
Yeah, it's 2 years after Austin Powers, so it's like peak her in America.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is like a pretty. We were talking about in the beginning that it's the best type of remake that you could hope for. This is something that takes the spirit of the original and combines it with a contemporary setting, and I think everything that comes with that contemporary mindset. It improves on the look and the special effects and the promise of the first one that it maybe didn't have the budget or the technology or whatever for, and it manages to do it without being a shot for shot remake. It manages to be relevant to the time that it's set in.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that kind of dates this movie, Orlando Jones. This came out in the era where like Orlando Jones was in every movie.
He had such a good agent for like 2 years.
Yeah, because he was in this, The Replacements. He obviously had the Make 7 Up Yours commercial. He was in that movie with David Duchovny with the Evolution.
Yeah, Evolution.
Yeah, like, he was just in everything for a while. He was in that Time Machine movie that came out a year after this one. and he was like the AI kind of guide throughout the future. Like he was working so much at the time.
Yeah, it's crazy that it feels so dated because of the presence of an actor. Like that guy really just had a spike for a few years and then was gone.
Yeah.
Even more
he's
so than
still
like Sam
around.
Worthington
Like I
or
still see
something.
him in things, but it's like not as big of a deal. But like he was a sell. Like he was a get for a little bit.
Yeah, he was on Mad TV, right?
I don't know what to me, he appeared with the Make 7 Up Yours. That's the first time I ever saw him.
I think he's doing some voice acting these days.
Oh, I'm
which
sure.
I feel like,
good for him.
You know, a lot of people do that once they stop being relevant.
Yeah,
which is a shame.
But some of like the actors who do that, like Keith David, you know, he kind of peaked in the late 80s, early 90s. And he's still consistently in things, but he was, you know, Goliath in Gargoyles. Like he has done so much voice acting. He's prolific.
he got to be on Community for a year or two.
What was that?
He was on Community for a year or two. I can't remember if he did.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Community. Yeah, he did like the Yahoo season.
Yeah,
the 6th season. I can't think of his name. He plays. He's in Highlander. He plays Kurgan, the bad guy. He lives near me. I saw him at the grocery store recently. But same thing. Like he was huge in the 80s. Clancy Brown, huge in the 80s. But he's voiced everybody. He's been Batman, you know, as a voice actor. He's done like he's got like 300 acting credits on IMDb, and most of them are voice acting at this point. So voice acting is a good place to go.
Especially during quarantine.
Yeah, man.
Just do shit at home.
So this movie, I mean, the plot is the same plot as the other movie. It's just contemporary. And the wishes are mostly the same too, just twisted with a contemporary kind of thing. There's a few added, but what are some highlights for you guys on this movie?
For me,
BJ, go ahead.
I love the character of Elliot so much more because I did something that I just needed to know. Looking at reviews of the original and reviews of this remake by people who would have been around. So like Roger Ebert was one of them. And It's really interesting to me how many people, because they're male critics, really empathize with like our OG guy and can't stand Elliot, whereas I'm the complete opposite. Like in the OG Bedazzled, I'm just like, I have no patience for you. Like, oh, a girl doesn't like you and now you're suicidal, grow up. Whereas Elliot, I see
he loved her for 6 years too. It was so long.
Like, and then I look at Elliot where I'm like, oh, you are trying so hard to be like liked and cool, and it's just not working for you. And that makes me feel a little bit more empathy towards this character.
He's just a good person.
Yeah, he's just kind of a goober. Like, he's really trying, and it's just
like
not
he's
working.
Probably on the spectrum a little bit, and he just doesn't realize. Like, he really doesn't understand until the end of the movie that people don't like him and are making fun of him.
Yeah, he's just kind of human cringe. Like, because he even has those moments where he's talking to Orlando Jones in the office and he's like, oh, my man, my brother. And I'm just like, oh, God. Like, you just want to, like, grab him and shake him and be like, no, like, please stop doing this. But no one's ever told him, like, this is not how you function in society.
Yeah, I feel like he was probably, like, a homeschool kid.
Yes.
Maybe on the spectrum a little bit, like very, very high functioning.
He's the extension of his character from Blast from the Past. Like, he just doesn't get it. So that's a change that I think is really, really strong. But Brendan Fraser is just such a chameleon in this movie because he is coming to every one of these just absolutely absurd characters.
He essentially plays 8 characters, or 7 characters across all the wishes.
And he's being
so sincere. His Elliot is completely different at the end too, so it isn't like another character.
Yeah. And he's just bringing such sincerity to it. He like none of them are like he's not phoning any of these in. And I think that the other big strength that this movie has is that the cast of characters also change within the wishes, like which I think is so much smarter and makes more sense to me than, you know, George Spigot randomly showing up in some of the wishes. Like, is it supposed to be George? Is it supposed to be the devil? It's never really clear in the original one. Whereas in this one, it's like, okay, yes, this is like watching an improv show and they're switching characters. I know what's going on now.
Yeah.
I both liked and didn't like that because, and I was going to kind of save this towards the end, but maybe I'll kind of tee it up and so you guys can kind of think about it and we can come back to it at the end. But to me, I didn't really understand like how the wishes actually worked because in this version, instead of blowing a raspberry, he has a beeper and he pages 666 and then he's taken out the wish. And there's a point in this one where they reference like you need to use your last wish. There's an expiration date on it. And what I didn't understand is like, well, what if he was mostly happy on his first wish? Now, granted, she was going out of her way to make them bad because she's the devil. But like, what if you just wanted to amend your wish and add something and use a second wish without canceling out the entire wish? Like, it doesn't seem like it's not like you're actually getting 7 wishes. It's like you're getting 7 attempts at one wish.
My main like I call it a gripe, but it didn't kill the movie for me. But I kept what's the industry term? Pinging on this one thing. He would make a wish and like I think the best life that he wished for was the gay guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
He was rich, incredibly smart.
Everybody
hung
loved
like
him.
a fucking horse. Like there's nothing bad about that except the girl that he wanted, but in that character he was also gay. Like he wasn't even interested in her. So like just live in that. Or he was a famous basketball player. Why not go back to that wish? Why not be like, okay, cancel that wish, do the exact same thing. I want to be a little bit smarter and have like a normal sized dick. Then let's do that. You know, like why not just amend the wish?
Fine tuning. It was just like all or nothing.
Yeah. Or even live in one of these things for a while. Because it seemed like he could do the pager and then go right back to, you know, when he made the wish or whatever. Like I would want to be a basketball player for a little bit. Fuck having a tiny dick. Like I want to be
and then
famous
the other
for a minute.
issue that I kind of had along the same lines was because all his cast of care, all of his coworkers were coworkers or friends or colleagues in each of his, or even rivals in some of the wishes. But he was really into Allison was the name of the woman he was in love with in this one. And I like at the end of the movie, the realization he has about Allison at the end. Mm-hmm. But in this, like each wish, he was a completely different person. It wasn't, I'm Elliot and we're just together. It's like, well, no, I'm a Colombian drug lord, or I'm a basketball player, or I'm this, writer. But all aspects of his life changes. Like Allison, when he's the basketball player, Allison is a reporter when, kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
And
they're kind of playing fast and loose with those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like none of them are the same characters. So it's like, well, now granted, I think at the end of the movie, it kind of makes sense. So essentially the end of the movie is he realizes one, like all these people who he works with are not nice to him and he needs to stand up for himself. And he does.
Well, I have opinions about that.
I have a couple too on that and we'll get to it. And then the other thing is he realizes he goes downstairs and he talks to Allison because he's a little bit more confident. And he's like, you know what? I realize we've, worked together for 4 years. We've bumped into each other a couple of times, but I really don't know you. Let's get a cup of coffee kind of thing. And I think that's kind of the message of the whole movie is like he put this woman on a pedestal that he doesn't really know. Mm-hmm. So I guess she can be interchangeable in each wish because he doesn't actually know anything about her. So it's not really bad that she's not her. But in reality, each wish, it's a different person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also like faster loose on what he remembers because he remembers he has the wishes and he seems to have all of his memories from, I guess you can call him like Elliot Prime. But then he also remembers random stuff like when he's articulate and he's rich and he's gay, he has all that knowledge and he remembers writing his books and he remembers all the places that he lives and his publishers. And then when he's
jumping around in the multiverse.
Right. And then when he's the Colombian drug lord, he doesn't seem to know anything until he speaks Spanish. He's like, oh, I do speak Spanish. But then he sees that version of Allison with Raul, and he remembers to go, oh, Raul's been teaching her Spanish for 6 years.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And he's good. Like, it's weird. Like, he doesn't remember things. And I think that would be, like, a terrible life to live, to be, like, kind of
self-aware,
transplanted in this life and not know anything about this life that you're in. But then he kind of has some knowledge of the life that he's in.
I think this movie is sort of approached as like a fable or something. It's like a morality tale where like
it's kind of like Quantum Leap.
Yeah, you're supposed to worry much more about the moral of the story and what
Elliot
learns from all this, and not like the plausibility or like how he's zipping around in the multiverse and getting to this and that. I keep on like referencing WandaVision, then pulling back a little bit.
Well, I also think that's just a very American thing for us to do, whereas I think when it comes to other cultures, they'll present something and they're like, this is just what it is, and we all just go, aha, yes, I accept this. We're in America, we're like, we need to figure out the logic of what's happening here.
Well, there's actually something interesting from the first movie that I looked up that ties into this a little bit. There's the story of the tiger and the cliff. Do you guys remember that from the first movie? So it's a real, I'm not going to get it right. It's a Buddhist Zen story.
Oh yeah, I remember what it was.
So basically the story is like this guy's being chased through the woods by a tiger, and he jumps off a cliff, but holds on to the edge of the cliff so the tiger can't get to him. And down below, he sees that there's another tiger pacing below him. So he's surrounded by these two tigers. And as he's trying to figure out what to do in this situation, he sees there's a mouse that starts chewing on a vine that's going to make him fall. And then he sees a patch of fresh strawberries growing out of the cliff. So he reaches over and eats one of the strawberries. And that's it.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the American way to look at that story is like, well, what happens to the guy? Does he fall? Does he climb up? What happens with the mouse? Why is there a strawberry? Blah, blah, blah. And the point of the story is like, just enjoy what you can in the situation that you're in.
Well, and that completely goes over Stanley in that version. He's just like, well, I would never put myself in a situation where I'd be around two tigers. Completely missing the point of the story. So highlights for you guys on this one, because we're about an hour 8 in, so we want to start winding down, but I want to make sure we get to the things that made you guys most happy about this movie, or what you hated.
I can shotgun a few, but BJ, why don't you go first?
Sure. I love every outfit change that Elizabeth Hurley has.
Yes.
Like,
Me
put
too.
her in the
so
lore.
good.
She's, oh my God, she is just a dream in this movie.
Some of the wardrobe was hers. Like when she's the teacher, that was her own wardrobe. She provided.
I'm
it
not
that
surprised
day.
in any way, shape, or form.
Can you believe Hugh Grant gave that up?
A fool. A fool.
What an idiot.
There's a wardrobe malfunction in this as well.
Yeah, I caught that. You sent me a screenshot of it, and I totally noticed that too.
I don't know how they left it in the movie.
She has a dress that's like slit at the leg up to her navel.
Yes.
And there's a point where she kind of like stands up really fast, and you can see
Yep.
everything.
Everything's there.
I love the dolphin song.
I love how he committed to that character with the freckles, the pasty skin, and like the curly ginger hair.
God, I love it. The dolphin song, like, is one of those memories from childhood that, like, I don't know how to do taxes correctly. I don't know how to do anything, but like two things that I will go to my grave knowing are the dolphin song and like Stickley's address. Like those are the two dumb things that my brain is like, this is vital. We're keeping it.
Yeah. I had not thought about the dolphin song in 10 years or since it came out probably. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, fuck yeah.
This
is awesome.
And another big standout for me, I love this movie's version of God and how God is not this like all-seeing, all-powerful thing that like is too big for us to fathom. I love that God is as much like part of this machine in this world as the devil is, where it's this thing like, devil's got you down, I'm here for you. And it's like, oh, I love this. What a great change.
Well,
yeah,
also,
that was
like,
cool.
That was God, and
that was cool to the point. This is a little abstract, but that scene was good to the point where 20 years later, I saw that guy and I was like, I remember him so vividly that I thought he was in a bunch hasn't stuff. And I was trying to like place him, and he's been in like a few TV shows. He's not.
Yeah,
I mean, he's a
like
consistently working actor, but he's not.
He hasn't done any like his next biggest project besides this one is he was just like one of the other soldiers in Black Hawk Down.
Yeah, but he made an impression on me.
Yeah,
no,
I remember as soon as I forgot about God in this movie, but as soon as I saw him in the cell, I was like, "Oh, that's right, God's in this." And then they have like a Professor X Magneto moment at the end where they're playing chess with each other.
Yeah, that was
but
nice.
I liked that where it's like in this, there's a friendship, like the devil and God go hand in hand, and they don't hate each other.
They kind of
where...
like balance each other out, so to speak. And like this is going to be really nerdy and dumb, but there's a play called JB that's essentially like a retelling of the Book of Job. and the devil and God serve as these narrators, and they treat the whole thing like they're rival, like carnies, basically. And it's like
Rival Carnies is a movie I need.
they're rival carnies, but like it's God and the devil, and then like in center ring is Job, and that's kind of what this movie is doing. But I like that it's God is not like this infallible thing. It's like, yeah, no, we kind of need the devil to exist in order to appreciate and, you know, whatever with God, in the same sense that like God has to be there to, you know, kind of pick you up when the devil's got you down. And I'm not a religious person at all. I look at this from like a purely like storytelling aspect. And I think that that's really clever and very cool.
Yeah. And I think they mentioned this movie too, but like, what is free will if we're not able to choose the wrong choice?
Right.
And what I like about that free will thing is, and I think that's a really great point to bring up, is God basically says like, dude, the soul's not yours to sell, but if you made this deal, like there's a way out. Like he essentially, without telling me, he's like, you could choose a different path and still be redeemed and be all right. And essentially what he had to do is just choose to be selfless. So when the seventh wish comes up, she forces him to take it, and she like sends him to hell, and she's like, wish your way out of this. And he's like, I just wish Allison to be happy. And that's how he gets out of it, is making a selfless wish. And obviously that would have never happened if he didn't have his conversation with God in jail.
Elizabeth Hurley's disappointed eye roll as a 500-foot tall demon has stuck with me for decades.
Oh, it's so good. Especially she's so disgusted and done with him. Just, like, what a great delivery.
And what's great, we didn't talk about this with the other movie, but it's something that comes out in both movies, and both leads explicitly say this, like, you are the best friend that I've ever had. You're the first person who's really ever understood me or gotten to know me. And in both versions, the devil says, you know what, I like you. And you get that. Like, you know, the devil ultimately wants to mess things up, but like clearly there are rules at stake where she does like him. Like, I get that she likes him. And yet her job is ultimately to try to get his soul, but she doesn't go out of her way to make it the worst thing possible. Like Alex said, some of these lives are downright livable. Like, the gay one, like, I almost feel like it's just obviously
there's nothing wrong with that
being,
life except that he doesn't have the girl that he wants.
And they don't
he just has the memories
like
of being
a bad
straight.
life either. Like they don't, it's not presented in this like this is the tragedy. It's just okay, that's not what I wanted, but it's here. It is.
And that's only an issue because he has his, I'll call it Elliot Prime memories. Like he has that whole life's worth of memories, but he doesn't have that. Like, you know, maybe if he did what Alex said and he stayed for, you know, a couple of days or a week, maybe his memories would start to come in and he would come to like that life. I don't know. But that dream I thought was, or wish I thought was, I laughed so hard when he brings Allison home and they're like kind of kissing and they go into the bedroom and his boyfriend's there. And the boyfriend is just like, I've had it. Oh, you've been drinking again. Like this has happened before. And then Brendan Fraser is like, this is like stereotypical, but I still found it funny. But he's like, the boyfriend like quizzes him about Broadway and he knows it. And he's like, will you shut up, bitch? And I just like, it's so stereotypical. It's bad, but like, I laughed so hard at Brendan Fraser just yelling bitch. I just did not expect that line to come from him, and it was taken back by it, but I did laugh.
That scene or that moment was really walking the line for me.
Yeah.
So like the Brendan Fraser end of it and like the concept of it, I guess, makes sense and I think sort of works in the movie. And the depiction of the boyfriend was like,
the boyfriend was a little over the top.
And that's the questionable aspect of it. But then this is like a holding to truth thing where it's like, I know how we were presenting queer people in the year 2000. Yeah. This is not wholly inaccurate. Offensive, yes. Inaccurate, no.
Yeah. Well, and also when you look at it, like the women at the party were like egging Allison on to like go hit on him. So it's like, I feel like this character's in the closet in that world. And so that is very much in line. And you also look at like Friends. Like Friends, I think is a funny show, but it definitely had some homophobic things. Like the worst thing you could be in Friends was like gay in that. Like they were always, criticizing each other if they did anything even a little gay. Scrubs, that was a through line the entire series from 2001 through 2009. Even if you look at 30 Rock, which, was mid 2000s, and that was a pretty progressive show, but still had some pretty homophobic stuff in the first couple of seasons. So I
was watching Jay and Silent Bob, and that came out around the same time. I think that was 2003 or 4.
Yeah.
And he's just like piling on the gay jokes throughout it, and then at the end, they fly into James Van Der Beek and Jason Biggs's dressing room when they're breaking up the movie, and Jason Biggs keeps on saying like, "Oh man, that's gay. That's fucking gay." And James Van Der Beek just turns to him and is like, "Why is everything gay with you? Like, who cares? It's not a big deal." And I was like, "Oh wow, Kevin Smith is like having his cake and eating it too, I guess."
Yeah.
But that's a pretty progressive take in 2004 or whatever it was.
Whatever year that was. Yeah, I think that might have been like, between 2000 and 2004, because it definitely didn't come out when I worked at the movie theater.
It was before there was a cultural shift that calling something gay when you mean that
that was a couple years later, because I remember in high school.
No, that's what I'm saying. It was before.
Yeah, because I graduated in 2006, and I remember when my best friend moved away between our sophomore and junior year, he moved away and moved to Hawaii, and then he came out. And I remember people were still using gay, just to say anything that was stupid was, "Oh, that's so gay." And I remember like when I was a sophomore making the decision never to do that again. And it was very prevalent during my high school. So yeah, this movie came out 6 years before even that point. So it's very much a product of its time. And like you said, that Too True thing, but I did feel bad laughing at it, but it was also just like, this is a movie that I remember watching this movie came out when I was 12. And I remember thinking this movie was hilarious when I was 12. So part of it is nostalgia, but yeah, I think like you said, you got to have your two truths and recognize what it is.
But I think ultimately it's a pretty progressive.
Yeah, I don't think it was malicious.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. And one of the jokes in it that I think is really funny is I love Brendan Fraser's like realization of being gay, and how a big part of it is him knowing who starred in the pajama game, because and also I always I culturally say pajama, but I've been in the pajama game where they like the director was like, "No, like get this Chicago shit out of your mouth. It's pajama." So the only time I ever say that correctly is when I'm specifically saying the pajama game.
That's so
because
funny.
Like that's also a movie directed by what's his nuts, who directed the original Bedazzled, which I think is so funny. Like
cool.
That's such a throwaway joke that unless you're a
little homage.
Yeah, unless you're like a little dork, or like the fact that like Elizabeth Hurley's dogs on the beach are named Dudley Peter. Cute. Love that.
So good.
Dudley Moore, Peter Cook. Yep.
Yeah, that was great. I don't want to keep on harping on it, but I felt like the thing that I really appreciate about the gay scene was that Elliot just they didn't present it as him having a choice about being gay. Mm-hmm. He just was, and it wasn't going to work because that's who he was.
And he accepts it.
So ultimately, I think that's the most. Yeah, exactly.
He just
So I think that's the most progressive.
Yeah,
he wasn't angry about it at all. No. He was just like, "Oh."
He shakes her hand. He's like, "Well, yep. Thank you for." It was like a job interview. Like, thank you for applying. There are other interested parties at this time. Don't call us. We'll call you.
Yeah, this didn't work. All right.
Just to start wrapping, and I know this one we didn't go into anywhere near as much detail on the jokes. Like we just kind of did the punchline for each one. But as he gets to the end of the movie, he shows up at work and he is talking to Elizabeth Hurley through his computer, and nobody can see it but him. So he has a meltdown, very public meltdown at his office, and basically it's like the end of Half Baked and Waiting was like, fuck you, you're cool, fuck you, I'm out, kind of thing. But he's definitely fired at the end of the movie.
I was gonna say he has a public meltdown in his office, and then I think the next day, right, he is done with the wishes, and the guy goes over and is making fun of him, which
and he just
feels very out of character for that guy. And then he grabs him. He physically assaults this guy. He's definitely losing his job.
Yeah, and everything. So he is more confident and everything, and that's good. And he goes and shoots a shot. But yeah, it's
being confident is great, but you still can't put your hands on people just because.
I agree.
they very lightly insulted you when you've been tormenting them for weeks.
Yeah.
I agree with BJ. Like he's very empathetic at the beginning, and I think it's a better portrayal than the sad sack in the other movie. But yeah, he's kind of a dick at the end of this one a little bit.
And I think it's another product of its time, because there's so many movies like this in that era where there is the kid who's been picked on, and then at the end of the movie they stand up to the bully and kind of thing. And I think that was like supposed to be that moment. But I don't know if that was necessarily earned. Like the part of him going downstairs and talking to Allison and him realizing, I don't know anything about this woman. I should get to know her before I become obsessed with her. I've been obsessed with her and know nothing about her. That felt like a good realization.
It's weird how nuanced that moment is
right.
for the movie, for the voice of the movie, as opposed to moments before when they completely like change the character of these characters.
Yeah.
And then have Elliot assault them, which like doesn't
like I honestly don't feel like it was that far out of line for the quote unquote bully guy, because like they were being overtly rude to him. He just didn't realize it because he just had that desperate need to be liked. But I don't feel like, where did that realization come from the lessons learned and the wishes?
I think
that he goes that. Like, where did he realize, like, I need to stand up for myself and these people are mean to me? Like, where was that realization and where did it come from?
I think the spark comes from when he shows up late, which is completely out of character for him up until this point. And his boss is, kind of railroading him about it and is like, somebody with your social skills or social standing, you can't afford to be like this. And I think that's the spark that lights it, because now
I guess I feel like maybe there was a scene edited out with the boss, like where the boss probably like came at him for something else at the beginning of the movie that probably got edited out.
There was probably something with the friends that was, or the coworkers that was edited out, the not friends,
because that part at the end seemed out of the blue, like that whole office scene at the end just didn't mesh with the rest of it.
And I do think that they were probably trying to chase the finally standing up for themselves, because he puts his hand on him, but he doesn't fight him. He just kind of like grabs the shirt collar and does like the nice talking to you, Bob. And it's in that moment where you're like, oh, you're exercising restraint, but like you cross that line and you know it. But in a weird way, I also think it's this like leaving this environment, which is clearly not good for him. And like, he's kind of, he's burning this bridge on his way out. I think maybe that's what's being chased here, but it's not his best moment, but he's.
I think if there's a beat where we saw that he was leaving that company because it was a toxic environment for him, then that would have worked better for me.
Yeah. I just think like
where he's making a choice to leave.
With the thing with Allison, which we've already talked about it being nuanced, I feel like that's the lesson of all the wishes, that she's interchangeable in each one. In every scenario, she could be a completely different person because it doesn't matter, because he doesn't know them. And like the coworkers throughout, essentially because he knows them a little bit better, I guess, like, when he's the Colombian drug lord, they're actively conspiring against him. And, they kind of, there's some snide remarks when they're the basketball commentators. So I guess like if he recognizes them, like maybe that's where it comes from, but it's a lot less overt than that lesson with Allison. But it didn't bother me. I don't think it ruined it, but I just
feel like instead of grabbing the guy by his collar and lifting him up, I think he should have done the Bane hand, just put it on his shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm in control now. I'm kidding. That's terrible.
Or even just had his moment where he's just like, you know what, assholes? All I've ever wanted to do is be your friend, and you guys lied to me all the time. I'm fucking out. Boom. Like, he could have even just said it. Like, I can see why I didn't mind the collar grab, but I do think it's out of character. I can see why.
I'm going to nitpick for like 30 seconds, but I think my main issue is that the coworkers at the end don't feel like the same coworkers at the beginning. It feels like they amped up their bullying so that they could give this moment to Elliot.
Right.
Because in the beginning, Elliot, understandably in some ways, but also like he's offensive to Orlando Jones. And he's offensive, not racially, but he's offensive to the married guy as well. Like, this guy makes it clear that Elliot makes this same joke to him almost every day. And every day the guy is like, I'm married. I have a wife. And the way that moment felt to me was like, you're disrespecting me and you're disrespecting my wife by asking me every single day to go get drinks and look at chicks. And you're like ignoring things that I'm telling you. So I kind of, I felt like they dialed up the bullying. My issue is with the filmmaking, not, these characters necessarily.
I definitely think there's some editing that was not done well. And then the very end of the movie, he realizes, like, Allison's like, hey, I have a boyfriend. And he's like, oh, I had no idea. Well, of course, how the fuck would you know? Because you haven't taken the time to get to know her. But he's like, well, if that doesn't work out, like, call me. But then he shows up and he's got a new neighbor who's her. Mm-hmm. It's just with brunette, brown hair. And then she's just like perfect. Like, she's goofy and a little awkward, but also has the same interest in audio, that he does. And it's like, that's a little weird.
I didn't need her to be the same actor.
No.
I felt like that makes it like the important thing about the first Allison, about the real Allison, was that she like looks a certain way, and it doesn't need to be in this movie.
Like, I'm sure you guys have both seen 500 Days of Summer, where at the end of the movie, like when he's finally over Zooey Deschanel's character, God, I'm terrible with name. I was gonna say her name first, and now I can't remember it. But he finds Autumn at the end of Minka Kelly, and it's just like, it's another character that he like finds something like it. I think it would have been better to have another actress as somebody just showing like he's moved on, because it still feels a little creepy. Like, oh, he's still into Allison and he's with her because of that.
I think it's like a weird, I don't know, maybe it's like a gift from, God and the devil.
God.
Yeah, I think like that's really weird in terms of its storytelling aspects. But ultimately, when I look at this movie, I am immediately transported into, I guess, a lot of the social messaging that somebody like Elliot was probably being fed, in terms of how to be cool, how to make friends, how to do all these things, because the year 2000 is just such a toxic, cringy place to exist.
It really is. Or was.
And we're not just talking about Britney Spears.
Yeah, no, like just in general. Early in quarantine, I did a full rewatch of the Rock of Love series.
Oh, God.
And like,
I hope you're writing an article or something about that.
I need to, because it is... Like, when
you need to get something out of that experience.
When we talk about, the world of like framing Britney Spears, we also need to look at like, what were we saying like men should do that was cool? And it was like that cringe ass behavior Elliot has at the front, where this like pickup artist mentality, and it's very uncomfortable to watch, but at the same time I have like this weird affinity and like comfort from it, of like, oh, thank God we're not there anymore.
Right. Well, I mean, you look at that.
To be clear, by the way, I was talking about the #1 pop hit "Toxic" by Britney Spears.
That's also
I don't
true.
think that was 2000 though.
Yeah, that's a good song that was out around that time.
You were making two very good points at the same time.
But yeah, I mean, to your point, BJ, before we start wrapping it, like, you look at what was on MTV at the time. You had like Blind Date and all those like weird reality dating shows where it was very much
Next
that
is
stuff.
basically like in real life
Next,
Tinder, and then you have Room Raiders, which is, I'm putting a black light to your bed, you gross pervert. You're like, what?
Yeah, super weird.
Yeah, that's bad.
We didn't talk about him being Lincoln, but I thought that was great, how he was just super like,
that's a fucked up wish.
What he remembers, he wishes to be the president, and so she puts him in Lincoln's body, which
that's
like,
messed up.
Does
we
that
went
mean
this whole time without talking about Brownface too.
Yeah, when he's the but does that mean every wish, like, he was just transplanted in somebody else? Like, was the gay man that he became, was like that another gay man, and he just took over that person's body, kind of like in Wonder Woman?
I was about to say, it's some real Wonder Woman.
I think it's also some like another similar, but not, like, this is very Heaven Can Wait, Down to Earth almost.
Oh yeah,
where like the body you're in like belongs to somebody.
Ooh, yeah.
I think the Lincoln one is the one that really fucks that up. I think for the other stuff, you could you don't have to think about it that hard, because they're not as specific. He's not a specific person,
right? Because every other one, his name is still Elliot Richards. But in that, like, he's a Lincoln.
Yeah.
That was
obviously, I didn't want to be Lincoln. I didn't wish to be Lincoln.
Yeah.
We're in a different time period.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Like,
that's the only time he's transported in time.
Yeah. when he opens up the champagne, he hears the pop. He's just like looking around, like.
I think that they wrote like a 15-page scene where Elliot was the president and there's a crisis in the Middle East and she was the Secretary of State or something. And the producers were like, you know what? We got to cut that for time, man. All right. We will make him Lincoln.
Yeah, probably.
It's now a 3-page
This movie
scene.
is also what taught me what play Lincoln was seeing when he was assassinated, because I didn't know, but for the rest of my life, I'll be like, our American cousin.
All
That's
right.
awesome.
Well, I think we already pretty much said it at the top of the episode that this is an ideal remake. I honestly was going into this expecting it to be, at least the second one, super cringy, super dated. I did not expect to enjoy it at all. I thought it was going to be bad, but I enjoyed it from beginning to end, despite some, hindsight showing that this isn't as wouldn't be as acceptable today as it was back then. But it was good.
I had a good time with it.
I had a good time watching both.
Frankly, I think they could remake it now too.
Yeah, absolutely. They could totally do this, and I don't remember what it was that we covered not too long. Oh, it was Manchurian Candidate. We talked about like you could easily do that every 10 years, and it would be a drastically different movie, and you could make it work. I do think that this is something you could do again.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so BJ, if you can give us your plugs where we can find you on social media, talk about your podcast again, give us the name, and then we'll also link all your socials on the episode description as well.
Cool. So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. It's just my name at BJ Colangelo. And you can find our podcast also on Twitter and Instagram and wherever it is you get your podcast. This Ends at Prom. And it's, an analysis podcast / celebration podcast on movies that are meant for teen girls. And we run the gambit, everything from John Hughes movies and, gross out teen comedies in the 70s all the way up to, the cringy time capsule teen films of the 2010s.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And Alex, where can our listeners find you?
As always, I'm on Instagram at dyslexic, DYS Alex IC, and I'm on Twitter at Polishi, just my last name. And you can follow along with the movies that I'm watching on Letterboxd at Polishi as well.
And you guys can check out everything that's MDXpods related at MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all at MDXpods. If you want to support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/MDXpods. But thanks for listening. And BJ, thanks for coming on. These were great movies to discuss. I'm really glad you picked these, and I had a blast talking to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for enjoying Elizabeth Hurley with me.
Always.
Always. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.